Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Dan. I've been loving your work and following your work for some time on all things leadership and culture. And today we're going to delve into what it takes to succeed, what it takes to flourish, and of course, bloom. The title of your brilliant book, Work-Life Bloom, How to Nurture a Team That Flourishes. Congratulations. The book, having read all of it, really resonated with my own journey professionally and personally, and the ups and downs, the vicissitudes of life. It's packed full of great research, your own journey as well, and lots of practical advice. Brilliant. Congratulations again, and welcome to the show.
Oh, Mr. Lansfield, David, thank you. It's great to be here. I was English. I guess I'm still English, but more Canadian than English these days. So thank you for having me on the show in my homeland.
Very good, very good. You're a global citizen and mindset. So let's delve in straight away. Work-life balance, that's a term that you're not a big fan of, yet is used in the corporate lexicon all over the world. So what's wrong with it, and how would you reframe it and redefine it?
Yeah, good way to start. Let's go out with a bang. Let's start with a bang, I should say. Well, to me, I come from a position where I've been in those executive roles in large, multinational organizations like an SAP, like a TELUS. And we're talking billions of revenue, tens of thousands of employees, and being in the shoes of helping both leaders see how to lead, but also that organizational culture facet of how to make the organization collaborate, purpose-driven, et cetera. One of the things that gnawed on me forever was this notion of work-life balance. I think from the beginning, David, we walk into it, the term and the concept, as a zero-sum opportunity. Right. It's sort of impossible.
Yes.
And the reason why it's impossible is that for years, even before the pandemic, I suppose that we thought that there could be this, demarcation between work and life, and that there's a line, and that you check out when you left the office and you go home, or when you're at home, you're not thinking about work. And it's just an utter lie, really. And when the pandemic happened, it really exacerbated the point. And now, I know we're not in a post-pandemic era, but we are living with a pandemic. And what we're seeing for sure and for certain is that team members, whether you're a leader or not, like the majority of them have said, yes, we want face-to-face interaction, but I can't balance this thing, work and life. And really what we're talking about, David, is integrating it. And if we're integrating it, my argument is that leaders and organizations have a fiduciary responsibility to help people, the people they pay and the people they serve, see that integration is possible, but also to help them with and achieve that at the end of the day.
So it's a shift, as you say, from a zero-sum game to sort of integration, because I've had some bosses, and I'll use that term bosses rather than leaders, in a way, talk about work-life balance as something as a bit of a luxury. It's like, look, we're under pressure. We've got performance goals to hit. We don't have the luxury of having work-life balance. What do you say to them?
The ones who say, yes, you must come in on weekends, answer the emails at 9:00 at night, be on call all times, and sort of, not be human. Those types, yeah, they are bosses. And that's kind of the point I'm making, is that there's far more bosses than human beings who happen to also be leaders. And what I see, and I know you do this as well, David, from the data, and whether that data is mine or the data that's out there in the public domain per se, that burnout, anxiety, stress, addiction, obesity, divorces, loneliness, all of it has catapulted over the past 15 years or so, since about the fiscal cliff era of 2008, 2009. So why is that, David? Why is it that we start taking better data? Or perhaps there's something more sinister at play here?
I think many of us put on masks and sort of have this, when we talk about success at work, it's a very narrow definition of success. And actually underlying it, there's all the things you just are talking about that often at play, but either it's fear or lack of trust, or just not the opportunity to say, what we want, who we are, and how we want to work, right?
This is it. And as much as I love collecting indigenous masks, one of the things that I notice is that if a leader is behaving or quote bossing with a mask on, they're not truly being themselves either.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're espousing sort of that edict of we all need to wear a mask when we come into work, or we're not allowed to quote be our best, true, authentic selves because we say that we want you to be at work like that, yet we really end up pointing to the closet of masks and say, hey, take one of these on, please. It runs so ironical to what human beings want.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
we sit there and we ask ourselves, why is engagement scores never moved? Why is work-life balance not happening? Why is stress, burnout, and anxiety through the roof? Like, come on, let's be real here. And you know what, David, I'll say this because I really like you. I've been culpable of this as well. I mean,
Me
I've
too.
been 5 years out of an executive role on my own little company of one. And I took a long, hard look back at my own leadership career. And I recognize that I'm culpable. I'm part of the problem. I was espousing work-life balance and employee engagement and bring your most authentic, best self to work. So this is as much a damnation on me, who I think I was a pretty good leader, not a boss. But I thought that was what we were supposed to be doing as well for years and years.
Mm. No, I hear you, and I feel, and I have the same. I mean, one of the things you just showed it there is you share some of yourself, not only in the book but in your work, and you do so skillfully. Some people struggle to disclose whether that's how they think, how they feel, what they want. What are your tips and advice to people who perhaps haven't done as much of that? Perhaps they have put a separation between work and life, but actually feel it should be more integrated. How can they do it skillfully?
Well, let's just say that first off, I was brought up a little bit with the keep calm and carry on mantra, and aided and abetted by the iceberg theory, which many will recall is you show sort of 1/8 of your true self and keep 7/8 below water.
Mm.
And I suppose I struggled with those two theories for years and years and years until I perhaps got into my early mid 20s. And I thought to myself, wait a second, hang on a minute. Can't I just be me? And so this notion, and for those that have skillets or frying pans that are non-stick, and sometimes used by the company called Teflon, that Teflon coating, do we really need to be Teflon? Meaning, shouldn't we let things stick to us? Because they do anyway.
Mm.
And so I just sort of basically, David said, I don't know, like, why am I trying to be someone I'm not? I don't need to be this Teflon character. So to your question, I think that's where millions of people, not just leaders, but millions of people struggle with, because they believe that they have to be someone else and that they are not allowed or shouldn't show that vulnerability, even humility, to be a human being for what? For the potentiality of there not being a bonus, or not being a promotion, or
Yes.
being called out for being something different than the norm, i.e., what many middle-aged white men think should be the DNA of an individual in a company or organization. So I think people wrestle and struggle, David, with their vulnerability and humility levels that they can't. And then they rue the day sometime later on in life and they say, gosh, why was I an arse, or why wasn't I myself?
Mm. Let's change the tone then, because your book is about blooming. Indeed, you have flowers on the screen behind you. I mean, how well branded can you be? I mean, you say, and you have your brilliant assessment, your global assessment, which I've completed and made me think about, where I think just under 40% of people say that they're blooming. Right, so there's a way to go. In a nutshell, if you were a leader or a manager of a team, thinking, you know what, I think we've got potential here, and I want more of us to be blooming. What one or two things would you call out that they can immediately start focusing on?
Well, tongue in cheek, first of all, I'm glad I didn't call the book Work Life Doom or Work Life Gloom, because there's a far greater proportion of people that seem to be on the other side of that fence. But I digress, David. I mean, one of the things that I'm pointing out in the book ultimately is that leaders really do have to have these conversations, dialogue, the old Greek agora, being dialectical, if you will, with their team members about work and life. And no, I mean, you're very kind already at having read the book. It's not about whether we have a garage sale or should we show up at our kids' art fair on the weekend, right? It's not that type of life thing. Do we buy a house or not? But it's about the certain factors that we develop in life that we need to bring back into the office or the organization, et cetera. So my point very explicitly is we can have conversations with our team members about things that are going on at work and things that are going on sort of in the self-development of character / life. And when we have those open, dialoguing-ish conversations and wondering what's working, what's not, in both facets, in both dimensions, then I think we at least have the opportunity to decipher and then do something about the people who may not be blooming. But I do want to make something very clear, and this is where I'm up against a tsunami, a avalanche, a meteorite of old school thinking. And that's, I'm not suggesting that blooming means engaged, by the way, because I think that many of the firms like the Gallups and Aons, et cetera, that they've commandeered the term engagement, put a word employee in front of that, and have taken out the humanity and the life part. And this is the whole point, is that we bring our lives into our work, nevertheless our work shapes us. And so why can't we just start there, David? Why can't we just start having conversations about that demarcation of work and life? And maybe that's where we start rather than everything else I've cooked up in the book. Step one.
Well, step one's a good one. It's a brave one, isn't it? Because if you're having that honest, frank conversation, which different people will engage or participate in, some will be very open, some will be shy. It's just the nature of their personality. It could be quite raw. So from what you've done or what you've seen, how do you, if you've not had that type of conversation before, how do you manage yourself so actually you're ready to participate fully and actually go with the conversation rather than what a lot of people do, which is to show the right intent, but they're really trying to orchestrate and manage it in their own self vision?
Yeah, I think it actually comes back to the other 2 points of vulnerability and being humble, if not demonstrating some humility. And that's, hey, David, I want to change as a leader. I feel that I haven't really heard you or paid enough attention to you as a wholesome self. And yes, I know we've got some things here to work on in the organization. There are some, work factors. Maybe our operating processes, our norms aren't so great, and maybe we could work a little bit more on getting you involved in strategy, or at least what's going on. But some of those, life factors, like how are your skills? Like, I want to have some conversation about how you feel about where your development is these days. How about your network? Do you have good relationships in and out of the organ? I want to level set with you, David. I'm sorry I haven't really been there for you, but can I open up a door to possibly having a conversation with you over time that starts to delve into some of these factors, some of these situations, so that you feel that you have a confidant, a trusted coach, mentor. I'm not here to solve it all, but maybe I can help you. That's the difference between boss and human being, David, just what I did there. And of course, you're already well ahead of the game, so I was just role playing for a second. But that's kind of what I'm getting at. Can leaders ultimately just step over the humility line and say, well, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm not really good at this and I haven't done this before, but I want to change because I know that when you're ideally more blooming, if you will, in both work and life, you're probably going to be a better team member anyway. So have at her. Let's try something different around here, David.
I love the positive intent, and I mean, who wouldn't want to have that conversation in whatever style that they decide to use? And I think one thing in particular struck me there, which is the person starting the conversation, not necessarily going to be the person to solve it, but at least is with you on that journey. And sometimes they may be able to solve an issue or give you funding or address an issue, but really you have to craft it yourself. So let's continue that theme. If you're somebody who's having more of those conversations, you're receiving a lot of information, insight, feeling, emotion, a whole baggage of collection of things. How do you look after yourself?
Hmm.
Because I remember reading about your own episodes of corporate life where, things really affected you. A venture shut down, affected you for months, if not years afterwards. How do you make sure that you don't take on everyone else's issues and it, frankly, affect your own mental health? Because it's hard. It's hard to be a robot, right? When you're hearing all this new stimulus about how somebody really feels about life, you do that 5 times, 10 times, 15 times.
Hmm.
How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, there's the old unintended consequence ultimately of being overly empathic, which then leads to empathy burnout. And so we
Hmm.
have to be careful of that as well. You can't take it all on. So shout out to my 24-year coach called Stephen Hill. And Stephen was one of those confidants for me where as a leader at SAP, at Business Objects, at TELUS for that 20-year-ish reign, I was on a bi-weekly basis having lunch or a session with Stevens, 60, 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it took, because I'm paying him, but I'm using him to kind of reflect back on some of these difficult conversations and getting an outsider's opinion. It's sort of like almost like organizational therapy.
Hmm.
And you can't, as a leader, I don't believe you can bottle those up because, as you say, David, when you're there to lead, there is always a fissure somewhere where some of the not so good will leak out. And what you don't want to do is have those not so good leaking out moments in front of another team member when you're trying to help them. So
Yes.
I do believe that we could all use a coach, someone, a confidant, someone where you're ultimately allowing yourself the opportunity to really bounce off of and potentially release some of the stress and anxiety that comes with being that team member for the whatever 10, 15 people that you're leading directly. That's step one. Step two, you got to find some other ways to do that, not just at the pub, incidentally. But I truly do believe in things like micro moments. So taking these opportunities during the day where you have 10 minutes or 50 minutes to yourself, these micro moments where it is partly self-reflection. Maybe it's a walk, maybe it's you listening to waves crashing on the shoreline, music, whatever it might be. Just you need a few of those, in fact, during the
Yes.
day to decompress. Because again, whether it's the work pressures of quotas and targets and operations and business failures and so forth, that's going to add up, not just you trying to help people to bloom, in both their work and their life. And the third is I do really believe in physical, mental, social, and emotional health. So those moments that are slightly longer in duration than the micro moments, maybe the macro moments, David, and that's the bike rides, right? That's the getting out with friends and going bowling or for picnics in the park. Anything that's where you're with other people or physically active or both, that gets you not in the trenches and doldrums potentially of such high pressure situations of helping people become their best selves, but also just you taking care of you so that you can be your best self in those moments.
Such great advice. Such great advice from the macro to the micro, from the therapy to the micro moments to all elements of health. Your book is clearly focused on teams, and in that process of discovery, opening yourself up, it's likely you're going to have all of the 4 personas that you articulate in the book, from, as you say, blooming to renewal to budding to stunted. How do you marshal a group which has all of those elements into one that ultimately the intent, at least for periods of time, would be that they're more closer to blooming, right? That's the intent.
Yeah. Yeah. So if people are listening in, the fact is, if you kind of think about a 2 by 2 matrix with work on the y-axis, that's the one on the left, and life on the x-axis, that's the one at the bottom. David, you did a really good job of introducing these 4 personas. And so if work and life are going really well, ultimately, then we're blooming. And so that would be on the top right if you're doing the old 2 by 2 matrix. And then the other 3 personas, budding, renewal, and stunted, sort of categorically go top left, and bottom right. So the key here is that, and I've done this self-reflection as a sidebar note across my 7 different roles / companies I've been a part of, I've been all four. I've been all four in the same organization.
Yes.
And so, number one, we can't all bloom at the same time, and number two, we're not going to bloom our entire careers. Let's get that out of the gate. Which is why, when you go back to sort of 10 minutes ago, Gallup and Aon are wrong. We wonder, oh, why, David, has employee engagement not materially changed in 25 plus years? Well, guess why? Because David Lansfield and Dan Pontefract have been both blooming, stunted, budding, and in renewal several times over the past 20 years. That might be for a short time where, work and life maybe aren't going so well, so we're in need of renewal. Maybe that's a 6 or 9 month stint over a past 20 years. Maybe we've done it twice because things have happened with our relationships, or things have happened with our lack of respect, and maybe we don't understand the strategy, and maybe we don't have a sense of purpose at work. Okay, so we've fallen into renewal because a new boss showed up, or we were acquired, or I've moved home from Manchester to Liverpool and I'm still a United supporter and everyone wants to take me out. Fine, that's going to happen. So, but like, we've been stunted and budding and blooming in different cycles, just like the seasons. As there are four, there are different ways in which that we might bloom or not. And I think that's kind of the key first to establish. And then leaders having those open conversations are like, okay, David, so tell us a bit. What I kind of get this feeling that things are going really well with you and your self-development, right? Your well-being is off the charts. You seem fit. You look like you've lost a stone. What's happened? This is amazing. Looks like you've got a ton of relationships. But what's going on here at work? I mean, I'm not sure I understand. Can you tell us a little bit more about why, maybe you don't feel like you belong right now? Is there something there? Because that's one of the work factors, obviously. Are you feeling valued? Like, is there something I'm not doing or the team's not doing to make you feel that? So there's those open conversations, and we're trying to get to the root and at the root of, well, why have you fallen into maybe one of these personas, a different one other than blooming, right? Yes, the goal is everyone we should try to get them to bloom. But as soon as you get someone to bloom, maybe another person's fallen down because something else has happened in their life. And I think that's the key, is that I don't expect there to be anywhere more than 40-ish% of the people on a team blooming, based on the research I did, at least. And then I look back to Gallup and Aon and Blessing White and Great Place to Work, and it's the same there. Like, nothing's changed. So maybe we've just kind of looked at this model as a hopeless effort in billions of dollars spent in employee engagement tiger teams to say, well, actually, it's okay. People are going to go in cycles. And our job as leaders is to understand where they're at and to help them maybe get back to that blooming phase or stage or persona more quickly than ever before. That's our job. Maybe that's, David.
Well, perhaps that's it. Perhaps that's it, which is that opportunity to reflect on where you are, and then encouragement and backing to move in some form of direction, rather than, as I alluded to, trying to create everyone in this effectively what could be perceived as the same mold, which has everyone's blooming, which organizations I've either known or been in, sometimes that can then be translated into everyone having the same approach or model. It's not explicit, but that's the writing, underneath it. I mean, you talked about belonging there.
I just wanted to give you an example, of me. So back to your point earlier, you're happy to share your life, misery and magnificent moments. So back in 2011, I'm still chief learning officer at TELUS, and we have a 6, a 4, and a 2-year-old. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's their ages. And Denise, my beloved, is hunted for a role. We're living in Vancouver and hunted for a role in Victoria, which is on an island, and it's the capital city of British Columbia, Canada. But nonetheless, it's a ferry ride, a float plane, an airplane, or a helicopter to get back and forth between Vancouver and Victoria. So my job technically is in Vancouver. And now all of a sudden we're like, yeah, let's do this. Let's move to Victoria. I got to tell you that where I was blooming because work was going well and Vancouver was awesome and my relationships were great. My health was great. My well-being, my agency, I was self-determined, etc. I was just rocking it. And then ultimately that trip to Victoria and the ensuing 2 years, I fell hard, like quite hard, in between sort of the renewal phase, but mostly in the budding phase.
Wow.
You know, my work was great, but I was just lost because I had no network in Victoria. I felt that I wasn't belonging in Victoria. I felt I wasn't respected in the community like I was, you know, in Vancouver. And I struggled. And Denise knew it, kids knew it. And then I sort of had to have that epiphany moment where I'm working with my leader's leader, and I'm working with my coach, Stephen Hill, and I'm working with Denise. And I had to come to this, moment, David, where I needed to dig myself out, pun intended, right, of this budding phase to get back to blooming. And it was all about my self life character key criteria, like feeling respected, the relationships in this town, and feeling a sense of agency that I owned this and I needed to dig my way out of this. So there's a little example where for 2 years I was in this budding phase as opposed to blooming, and I had to dig my way back up to the blooming phase, which I did because I worked on a couple of those factors.
Just give me a specific example of what an action you took.
Yeah.
That moved you forward.
It's a fantastic one. So the way the model works is there's 6 work and 6 life factors, and you have to have 5 or 6 in any combination of the 2 work and life factors to actually achieve a blooming state. So you basically have to have 83% of both working for you in a positive manner. So I honestly, without really having a model to look at the time, but I definitely knew that I was not plugging myself into anything in Victoria. So my relationships, the face-to-face ones, like being part of a community, was zero. I went from being awesome, ultimately in the community in Vancouver, to like zero, and not wanting to do anything about it because I was just pining and yearning for Vancouver. I was like, oh, well, I'll just go do my networking over there when I'm over there, and I won't worry about building up a relationship or anything here in Victoria, which was terrible, but that's really what I did. And the second part is related to that was respect. I didn't feel respect both with Denise, because we had made this decision, but it was for her and not us.
Yes.
And I ultimately fell into some disrespect between us and the way in which that I was handling a situation. So my respect for me plummeted like below soil. I don't know what that is, but it was no longer, it was clay. It was like, it kind of had to find a way to nurture my way out of that. And I did. And those were 2 of them, very big ones, respect and relationships, that I had to come to grips with and really replant so that I could get back up to where I needed to be.
Oh, well, good for you. And that sounds like a big shift. And I bet if people were to do the same, looking at their own life, and I'm mentally now doing it to myself, but this is your podcast, not mine, so I won't say anymore. That's for another day. I bet many of us have had those moments, but perhaps we haven't studied them enough. Perhaps we haven't reflected and understood them and actually taught us how we can then share that wisdom with others and encourage other people to go on a similar journey. And that takes you to the point about leadership, which is this book is not only about, but largely about. You talk about a different leadership lens, and I want to quote you because you say we need to peel back the bark of what we think it means to be a leader and devise a new harmonious order and a spiritual intelligence for team members. I'm curious about what specifically that means, and very actively, this podcast is all about action. So what does it actually involve?
I can't believe I actually wrote that. That sounded pretty good, to be honest, I must say. And
no, sorry, that was a different book. No, that was your book. No.
Yeah, Chat GPT free. That was Dan GPT. Well, metaphorically, of course, when you think about what's at a tree is protected by bark, and it's done so for a reason, obviously, because we don't want the tree to be weathered. The tree doesn't want to be weathered per se, and inside of that is where you've got the roots, you've got the trunk, you've got the foliage, and there's this highway in a tree of goodness that occurs. So the roots are branching out. That's wrong. The roots are seeding out so that it finds its soil nutrient kind of capability to bring up that through to the trunk. The trunk acts as that sturdiness to protect from the wind, from the rain, from the hail, from the sleet, from the inclement events, whether it's a hurricane, tornado, whatever, right? And then the cycle and the seasons of the foliage where the branches are, right? They get nothing unless the roots and the trunk are doing its thing. So what I'm getting at, I suppose, right, is if metaphorically in the spiritual kind of intelligence, if we shed the bark and remember that we are in charge of our own leadership tree, that those roots, that trunk, and that foliage, that we're there then to demonstrate and almost idyllically portray what it means to be human by getting naked. Platonically, of course, you know what I'm saying, to drop the bark and to say, look, there's more to me, and there's more to this forest of whispering trees, perhaps, than meets the eye of the bark that protects it. How's that for
No, I love that.
elongating the
Gosh,
point?
that was a journey, wasn't it? That was a journey. That was beautiful. And I mean, the number of people who I've seen get close to retirement of different ages and go through that process, and you think, gee, why did it take so long? And imagine if that became part of your own, I'm mixing things now, DNA from the beginning, where you could have that openness and humility and ability to talk with people in a way that's deeper, more human. Wouldn't work be more fun and, very importantly, not just fun and purposeful, but actually probably more productive? Because a number of people, I think, oh, this is all great and this is a little bit soft. It's not going to help us deliver the results. I think that's BS. I think actually this will be incredibly important for the success, the profit, and the purpose of organizations. But let's just delve further on you, because you've already shared a bit about you, Dan. I mean, how do you describe yourself right now?
Ooh, really good point. I think I'm a bit stunted. And by the way, I have gone back and I looked at all the personas, all the jobs, right? And I actually did a first kind of work-life bloom keynote in June. And I'm on stage and there's like 1,000, 1,500 people in the audience, whatever. And I'm going through this. I'm thinking to myself, I'm having an existential crisis on stage. What am I doing right now? Anyway, I would say right now I'm stunted. There's some things going on which ultimately, in the Pontefract group, which is Dan Pontefract Company of One, where I'm like, are people not liking me? What's happening? Like, business is down about 25% year over year. And I don't know if like I have my best before date has come. I'm just wondering, like, there's lots of great clients that are recurring and etc. But a lot of those one and done keynotes or workshops have like kind of not dried up. They're just not at the same pace as it was in my previous 4 years of being an independent solopreneur company of one. And so I've had some summer reflection, thinking to myself, God, what's my strategy here? Like, what's happening? I'm not quite as full of what it is that I suppose I should be. So I feel a little bit stunted because my work factors of me are, there's a few there that have not really resonated for the last 6-12 months or so. So be all honest.
I guess the great thing is that you have, and you talked about this, strong networks personally and professionally that you can use to help work through that if you wish, depending on how you want to go. But if you think of the bigger picture beyond stunted right now, and you think about your impact on the world around you, how would you describe it and what do you want it to be?
Yeah, well, I was pretty micro, right? I'm like, what is Dan feeling like today? Well, I'm pretty stunted, to be honest, David, today. I mean, I never set out as a boy going from outside of Toronto, where I grew up in Ontario, Canada, to McGill University in Montreal, where I met Denise, that French gal I alluded to, and got married right away after university, and are still married. For those that are like, oh, did she leave him? What's happened there? No, happily married. My journey has always been one in which I somehow, David, found myself in, captain of football clubs and president of student councils. And I don't know, I just I've always found myself naturally gravitating to helping people. And those roles I had in the organizational land where I was leading teams or leading organizational culture change, I've learned a hell of a lot. So many people have taught me along the way. I feel like my encyclopedia of love and learning has fueled me for those years. And I guess the books, part of it is staying married to Denise. So I have to get out of her hair because I have so many things going on in my own head. Each of them have a key word. So Flat Army was flat. How do organizations become flatter, but still with a hierarchy? Yes. Purpose effect, obviously. How do we have this sense of purpose, both in life and in work? Open to think is obviously how do we be more open in the way in which that we're operating? Lead, care, win. How do we care, which is really about empathy in the things that we do, and work-life bloom. How do we bloom in both work and life? So I've always had a key word that I hold on to and think, well, might we do this differently? And can I impart that somehow? Not that I have all the answers, but go find maybe people that are doing this thing, whatever it is, bloom, care, what have you. And that's where the writing really comes. It's just, I got an itch to scratch.
Fantastic. And when you're having your absolutely best day possible, you're really smashing it in every sense, what helps you the most? What practices do you use?
Yeah, I would say that's got to be both my physical and my emotional wellness. So when I hear from the kids who are 20, 18, and 16, whether directly by text, FaceTime, what have you, and I know that they're okay, then I'm okay. When Denise is thriving, flourishing, and blooming in both her work and her life, I know that I'm going to be okay because those are the four clearly most important people in my life. When I'm on like I will be doing in 2 hours from now, when I'm on one of my 60, 90, 2-hour, 3-hour bike rides, those bike rides are so important to me. And I usually do about 5 a week because that's where I'm not just looking at the outdoors, but I'm listening to myself. I don't listen to music. I just listen to myself. I listen to the outdoors and I recalibrate, 5 days out of 7. So that's a pretty good day when those two things are happening for me. I guess that's a bit of work and life.
Fantastic. You're practicing what you preach, which is refreshing to hear, as I'd expect. Dan, it's been a stimulating conversation. I'm grateful for sharing your experience, being so candid, and actually giving some really practical tips that people can use. I highly recommend the book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's already made me think differently about all the things that I need to actually continue doing, but also shift as well. So thank you for that. Where can people find out more about you and your brilliant work?
I'm not sure about brilliant, but I really appreciate the kind feedback, David. And it takes people's curiosity and leadership to do things like this and to poke in and say, oh, I wonder what's going on over here. And I just appreciate greatly you having the opportunity to open the book, read it, and to assess, but also to provide a nice compliment. So that from one thought leader to another, thank you for that. Easiest way, probably just the book's title will get you all the same place, worklifebloom.com.
Very good. Very good. Well, Dan, thank you again. And that was another edition of Lancefield on the Dine. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Do check out the other episodes in the series. Sign up to my podcast and to the YouTube channel. And if you're feeling exceptionally generous, give me a nice rating too. Dan, thank you ever so much again.
Thank you, David.